afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on when to apply manure and an overview of the BC Application Risk Management Tool. My name is Emily Carmichael, and I'm Resource Development Agrologist with the BC Ministry of Agriculture, Food, and Fisheries. Before we begin the presentation, I'd like to acknowledge with respect and gratitude that I live and work on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen, now known as the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations, who've cared for these lands and waters over countless generations. Today, these traditional territories are currently being dusted with some fluffy white snow, but as we gather online to learn, we're coming from various First Nations territories from across the province, and I would like to invite everyone to feel free to type in the territory or territories where you live and work in the question box. And there are a couple housekeeping items that I'm going to quickly go over so you can best participate in today's event. Today's presentation is being recorded, and for that reason, you won't be able to ask questions verbally. However, we encourage you to please type in any questions you may have into the question section into your control panel at any time during the presentation. And I'll be monitoring the questions, and Josh will answer them partway through the presentation and then at the end of the presentation. And one final item, you'll notice there's a handout section, and if you take a look there, you'll find there's a PDF of the slide deck available for you to follow along if you'd like. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Josh Andrews to you all today. Josh Andrews is a nutrient management agrologist at the BC Ministry of Agriculture, Food, and Fisheries. His role is currently focused on developing tools and information for BC farmers regarding the use of manures and fertilizers, and also providing guidance for soil sampling and testing. And with that, I want to pass it on to Josh so we can get going.
Thank you. So I am Josh Andrews. I am a nutrient management agrologist with the BC Ministry of Agriculture, Food, and Fisheries. And today I'm going to talk about our application risk management tool, which we call the BC ARM tool, and how it can be used to plan manure applications. Emily, can you see my screen?
It's looking good. Yep, perfect.
Okay, good. Okay, so today, talking about our application risk management tool, or the ARM tool, I'm going to talk a little bit about the background, give a little bit of an intro on how the ARM tool works, give a brief demo, do a summary, and then take some questions. So at this time of year, deciding when you want to do manure applications can be a little bit difficult because if you looked outside, you may be wondering, what's the weather going to look like? And then you may also be wondering, after this weather, what is my field going to look like? And then what else might I need to consider when I'm considering my manure applications? So the first thing you're thinking about is, how do I plan this? How do I plan to make the application? And then how do I do this application without all of this manure that I'm applying being lost as surface runoff? Because we all know keeping manure on the field means that there'll be greater nutrient uptake by the crops, which means you'll need less fertilizer, and then hopefully you'll end up with a better quality forage or crop. But if you lose that manure in surface runoff, you will not get those crop benefits. There will be pathogens in surface water, and then there will be the potential for eutrophication, which is when nutrients get in surface water and it can cause algal blooms. And then another thing you might be thinking about is, okay, I've made this plan and I want to apply, but how do I record that I've done my due diligence, that I've thought about the correct things before I make this application? Because many of you may know about the AEM code and that it says a risk assessment should be completed in October, February, and March before manure applications if you're in a high precipitation area, which is of course the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island. And I just want to note here, if you're outside this region, this is not required, but I think many of you may have seen this figure on the right about manure spreading in the South Coast. So of course our crop producing times and our growing times runs from April to about September. And then October is when our weather starts getting a little bit iffy. And our crops really aren't taking up as much nitrogen or nutrients from manure as they did during the growing season. So you can see in October, February, and March, a risk assessment is required. And then November, December, and January, no spreading is allowed in the South Coast. And so with that planning and AEM code in mind, we have worked on a tool called the Application Risk Management Tool, which we've shortened to ARM. So this tool is used to plan manure applications during the shoulder season being February, March, and October. And the way the tool works is it gives you the risk of manure loss with a low, medium, or high rating. And so the way this tool works is it lets you pick your area on your precipitation forecast map. So there's a map that gives you the 24-hour and 72-hour forecast for your area. And after you tell the map where you're located, you then move on to a field questionnaire. So you answer some questions about your field conditions. So things like soil moisture, soil cover, and water table depth. And the tool uses the precipitation and the answers you gave the field condition questions to determine your risk rating. And the risk rating is essentially the risk of manure loss under the rainfall and field conditions that you entered into the tool. And like I said, it'll give you a low, medium, or high. And there at the bottom of the screen is a cutout of our risk assessment. And so with this tool, we really hope that people will use it within 24 hours of application. Mainly because our weather can change pretty quickly and your field conditions can change fairly quickly as well. So you want to have the most accurate reflection of your field and the conditions. But more importantly, we want people to use this tool to plan when the manure application has the lowest risk of being lost in surface runoff. So that way more manure stays on the field and you get all of those great crop benefits. And so now I'm going to start off with a demo of this tool. And so if you have any questions during there, type it into the question box, and then as soon as I finish the demo, I will answer the questions. So let's see if I can do this. Okay, so now I am showing the precipitation forecast map. So this is the first step in completing a risk assessment using the ARM tool. So I'm sure what a lot of you immediately notice is the color. So I'm sure you've seen the green and the yellow. So the color on this map is actually the amount of rainfall that is expected, So green, of course, means low, and then the yellow is medium. And you can't see the colors on here currently, but if more rainfall was expected, an orange rating would be the medium to high rating, and then red would be high. Another thing you'll notice about the tool is here on the left-hand side, there is some instructions on how to use it. So I'm going to use our Abbotsford office as our example. So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. So an important thing to note is you don't actually have to zoom in to the exact location of your field. You just need to be in the general area. And so I just go to where our office is, which is about right here off the highway, and I just click. And so you'll see after I clicked, I've opened up a table here. So let me zoom into this table so you can see it a little better. So on this table, we have the date in the left-hand column, 24-hour precipitation in millimeters, 72-hour precipitation, and then the rating of the rainfall amount. So like I said, this is green, so it means it's low. So if we look across this row, today is the 10th. In 24 hours, we're expecting 1 millimeter of rainfall within the next 24 hours and also 1 millimeter in the next 72 hours. If we were to wait to say until the 13th right here, within 24 hours, we're expecting 5 millimeters, and within 72 hours, we're expecting 23 millimeters. So of course, that gives us a high rating. So just the first step, you can see if you're thinking about weather conditions and when you want to apply manure, maybe now would be the better time as compared to a few days from now. So this, like I said, is just the first step of completing a risk assessment using the ARM tool. So if I want to apply today, which based on the weather, it looks pretty good, I just click this button that says complete a risk assessment for today. And there's a little bit of lag here, but you'll see I've moved tabs. So I'm still in my browser, but it's created a new page for me to look at this. And so now we're in the field questionnaire portion of the ARM tool. And like I said before, the instructions at the top say fill this form out no more than 24 hours prior to application. And I know it says this as well, but this is for your own records. So information you enter this page is not shared with anyone, and it's not shared with me. So to get started, it asks what our farm name is. So we'll pretend we're on my farm. So we'll call it Josh's farm. And we scroll down a bit, and you can see the application date has been auto-filled for us. And then so has our precipitation amounts. So it's been rounded up for us in the table that we saw earlier, but we're expecting 0.85 millimeters in both 24 and 72 hours. And like I showed you before, the rating for that is low for the rainfall amount. So we tell people that this should be completed for each field that you're going to get that's going to receive manure. But if the fields have the same conditions, they can actually be combined together. So let's say I have 3 fields that need to receive manure, and they have similar moisture contents, and you really treat them as the same a lot of the time. So we'll pretend that we're doing fields 4, 5, 5 and 7. So 3 fields there, and it already has our precipitation. So now we get into the field conditions part of this tool. So the first question it asks us is our soil type. So our options are coarse textured. So these would be gravelly, sandy, loamy sands, or sandy loams. Medium textures would be loams, silt loams, or silt. So where our office is located, that would probably be a medium textured soil. But another option is fine textured. So these would be your clay soils, your silty clay loams, your sandy clays, things like that. There are organic soils, and you could also, if you really don't know, you could say, I don't know. But we'll stick with our medium, and we will move on to soil moisture. And so soil moisture, when the field is totally saturated, that's at about 90 to 100% moisture. And the way you can tell is if you're walking around that field and you can, feel the water squishing under your feet. And if you look down, you can see the water kind of seeping out of the soil around your feet, then that's saturation. In another range, about 89%, it's still fairly wet. Maybe you're not squishing around when you walk, but you certainly wouldn't want to drive equipment out there. So that's roughly 80 to 90% moisture. We haven't received a ton of precipitation at our office recently, so I would say that it's at about 60 to 80% moisture. And so you would reasonably be able to drive your tractor out there. You wouldn't worry too much about compaction or creating ruts. But your field is not totally dry. So that would be less than 60%. So scrolling down a little bit more, the next 2 questions it asks us is about the water table depth and the forage density. So the water table depth is basically asking how far from the soil surface is the water table. So around this time of year, it might be a little bit high. So I'm going to just guesstimate here and say it's roughly 2 to 4 feet. Then the next question is forage density. So this is how much of the soil is covered by your forage crop. So that is kind of a hard thing to guesstimate. So you'll notice we have a link here. So I click on this link, and just like before, we've opened a new tab in our browser up here at the top. So when I scroll down, oh, is it showing my screen? Okay, it doesn't seem to want to share my screen here, but basically on this other page, it is a Ministry of Agriculture page, and it has some pictures of different forage densities. So it will show our field if it is totally covered in grass, and then at 90% density, there's a little bit less, and then going down from that, every 10%, it shows us what our field cover is. So let's say we have good field cover, but it's not exemplary. So we'll say around 70 to 90%. Emily, a quick question for you. Is this showing my screen?
Yeah, so I see it just updated. So I see here the field service condition. So ponding,
Okay.
flooding, frozen soil. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, it's moving a little bit slowly, but I think we can work with that.
Yeah, there's a bit of a delay.
Okay. All right, I'll continue. So the next question we have here is forage height. I think that should be hopefully self-explanatory. I'll say something in the middle. So say something's around 3 to 6 inches tall. And as you can see, it's auto-filling the risk rating here for each area or for each question that we fill out. Field surface condition. So these are basically what your field conditions are like currently. So a thing to note here is if you select certain options, then it will not let you save your risk assessment. So if I were to click something like frozen soil, which of course is not allowed, you see it says stop, no application permitted, and it is an extreme risk rating. And hopefully I don't move too fast here, but when I scroll down to the bottom, uh, if you can see this, maybe not, I'll wait for a second. But there are some buttons you can click that you have at the very end of the risk assessment. There is the send email button and there is a print save button, and now they are both grayed out. So you're really not able to document your risk assessment if you have field conditions that do not allow for application. So there's, if you fill this out honestly, then there's no worry about accidentally applying when you're not supposed to. So I'm going to scroll back up. So back to field surface condition. So let's say we actually have some ponding going on. And I'm just going to avoid those areas. You can see that gives me a medium risk rating. So continuing a little bit, 2 more questions remain. One is asking about our nutrient application equipment. So a lot of applications are surface applications, but other options are below surface. So if you were to inject some manure or an irrigation sprinkler, so if manure would be applied using your big gun. Grazing is in a way a nutrient application method, or solid manure application, because of course solid manure doesn't infiltrate into the soil like liquid manure does. So scrolling down just a little bit, and the last thing it asks about is a water course for critical area. Because of course, if we're near a water course, we want to set back a little bit away from that area, just to ensure manure doesn't get in. So there's currently not a water course next to our office, but if you answer yes, you can see it asks us how far are we setting back from this water course. So it gives you some suggested setbacks. So these are the setbacks in the AEM code. So normally you want to set back at least 3 meters. But like I said, at our office, there is not a water course, so we select no. And you can see here that now that we finished, this has given us a medium risk. And so one thing I want to make sure that I do after I've completed my risk assessment for these fields is I want to document. So I want to make sure that my due diligence has been done. So if I'm on my phone doing this, I will probably click the send email button. So it will pop up and say, where do you want to send this? So you can do that. Or alternatively, if you're on a desktop, I recommend using the print or save button. So I click this, and it opens up my risk assessment in a different tab. You can see that here at the top. And it really just shows the same questions I just answered and what I selected. So I scroll through this and you can see, so for example, we see soil moisture here. I'll wait for the screen to catch up. But right beside soil moisture, where I selected 60 to 80% moisture, in bold it says selected. Okay, apparently it does not like this screen. So going back,
We can see that there.
oh, maybe the lag is just for me then. So another thing I'd like to note is, so say you have a medium risk here. Another thing I like about the ARM tool is you can kind of play with your answers to ask yourself, what if? So say you have a medium risk, you would say, what does it take for me to get a low risk? What needs to change about my field, or what needs to change about my application practices to lower the risk of manure loss and surface runoff? So let's scroll up a little bit and say, okay, maybe our field surface dried out a little bit, maybe there's no longer any ponding, and I click low. So would that be enough to change it from medium? Yes. So of course it's not always going to be that easy, but just an important thing to remember, just play around with these and you can see what's really going on. And then the last thing I want to show you with this tool is the clear button. So say you want to do a different field. So say you've done fields 4, 5, and 7, and say you want to do fields 6 and 8. You don't need to actually go back to the precipitation app. You just hit the clear button, and then you scroll all the way back up to the top. Hopefully that's not too much movement for everyone. And as you can see, our precipitation mounts are they are still filled in for us, as is the date. So a quicker way to fill out multiple risk assessments. And so with that, I will go back to the PowerPoint and then do a quick pause for questions.
Hey, Josh, we've got a couple of questions here for you. And so the first one is just about how the best way to find the ARM tool online. Is it just best to Google it, or how do you get there?
So that is one of my slides near the end. I guess maybe I should
Okay,
have put a little bit earlier, but I'll go ahead and
it's
answer it.
okay. We'll get to it. Oh,
Okay. So in the later slide, I have a link to it. You can also get to it through our nutrient management website, which is just gov.bc.ca/nutrient management. Or you can just Google BC ARM tool. In the top hit is instructions for using the BC ARM tool, and there's a link there.
perfect. That's great. Thank you. And another question here is, if you select don't know for the soil type, how does
Right.
that get accounted for in the risk rating? Does it just assume a fine texture?
Yes, it assumes a worse or a higher score for that part of the questionnaire. So it's always better to know what your soil type is. So it just increases the chances that you'll have a medium or high risk rating at the end.
Great. And I don't know if you're going to get to this in your next part, but if you don't complete a risk assessment through the ARM tool before you apply manure, can you be fined if someone doesn't think you should be applying it?
So the AEM code is enforced by the Ministry of Environment. It is not enforced by the Ministry of Agriculture, Food, and Fisheries. So like I said, we don't want you to send those to us. And we don't want you're not supposed to send them to anyone. So it's really just to keep for yourself. But yes, if you apply and the ministry, if a compliance officer shows up and asks you for it, then you should be able to give them your risk assessment.
Great. Okay, I think that's it for now, and then we'll answer the rest of them at the end if you want to carry on. Thanks, Josh.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. So let's see. All right, so in summary, the BC ARM tool can be used to determine the risk of manure loss and surface runoff. So the risk is based on your precipitation forecast or your rainfall forecast and your current field conditions. And so with the ARM tool, you can use it to plan manure applications for the lowest risk. So like you saw earlier, we are expecting some rainfall, so it would be easier. You would have a lower risk to do it now than you would later. But there will of course be scenarios where it will tell you the lowest risk might be later on in the week. Another thing about the ARM tool is it's a good way to learn how to minimize risk. So you can change the day that you apply, which of course changes your precipitation forecast, or you can change your field conditions to see how it affects your risk rating. So you could ask yourself, what if I want to wait till Friday to apply? What might things look like then? Or what if I let my field dry out just a little bit? And like I said, the ARM tool can help you document a risk assessment under the AEM code. And like I mentioned earlier, this is just for your own records, so please don't send them to me. Under the AEM code currently, the requirement is that you just complete a risk assessment in October, February, March, regardless of the risk rating that it tells you. But starting October of 2022, the tool must show a low rating prior to application. And one thing I really like about the ARM tool is that it is consistent. So everyone is getting asked the same questions to determine their risk of manure loss. But it also still is allowed for field-specific assessments. So there, of course, might be situations where the tool says maybe you shouldn't apply, you have a higher risk, but your neighbor may have a lower risk, but you're still getting judged on the same criteria. And then another thing I like is that it's quick and easy. My goal is normally you should be able to fill it out in less than 5 minutes per field. So we do have a little bit of data that says, yes, it's normally under 5 minutes. And another thing I like is you can do it on your phone. So you can actually be out on the field looking at your soil moisture, you can look at your cover, and things like that to really determine what is going on that specific field. And like I promised, here's how to get to the ARM tool. So you can go straight to our website. So I have it, of course, bookmarked on mine, so I just have one click to get to it. You can go to our nutrient management webpage, which is gov.bc.ca/nutrient management. And on that page, there should be a link called Manure Application and Seasonal Restrictions. If you click on that, the next page will contain a link for the ARM tool. And then, of course, my favorite, go to Google, type in BC ARM tool, find the page that says instructions for using the BC ARM tool, and you're off. So with that, I will end my presentation, and I know I already paused for a few questions, but if there are any more, I would be happy to answer them.
So, Josh, there's a question about if the tool has any capabilities to help you assess a rate for manure application.
So no, it doesn't really cover rates. So that's kind of up to you when you're applying. You certainly shouldn't apply so much that it's going to run off on its own.
And there's a question here that I have asked for a little bit of follow-up, but you might, just for clarification, but I think that they're getting at if you want to do a risk assessment for grazing cattle, if it's comparable for doing something like that.
Yes, so if you go to the nutrient application equipment question on the field questionnaire that we covered, grazing is an option. So especially if you're doing some intensive grazing where you're moving animals around many paddocks, you can definitely do a risk assessment for fields like that.
It's great. Yeah, and so you said you can use it on your phone, which is wonderful. And that first section that you use when you're finding your location, that's also compatible on smartphones?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I won't
And if
say
you,
it looks wonderful, but it's, yeah, I shouldn't have any trouble with it.
okay. It looks like there aren't any additional questions right now. We can I think just wait a few more minutes here. And in the meantime, I can just tell you guys a little bit about this. This webinar is being recorded and it'll be available online on our AgriService webinars page within the next couple weeks. And so I will include the link in there as well in the chat area for all of you to see that if you want to, if there's anything that you heard in the webinar or you're curious or you just want to listen to it again or send it to someone else, that's where you can check it out. It'll be there in the next few weeks.
Okay, I'll just say if you don't have any questions, on this slide you can see my email address and phone number. Feel free to call or email anytime, and I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Yeah, it looks like there's no additional questions. I did plop just pop that agri-service webinars page in there for all of you to take a look there for the past recordings, including this one. And again, I just want to thank you so much, Josh, for taking the time to show us all of this tool today. And thank you all for joining us on this webinar. And yeah, Josh's email is there. So if you have any questions, please just feel free to shoot him an email. And thanks again. And with that, we'll end the webinar and enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.